Sure. So, good evening, all. On the behalf of Mylan family, I welcome you all to this scientific feast of World Hepatitis Day. And before going to the details of the program, I wish and pray that you and your family is and remain safe from the curse of this pandemic. And Mylan seriously thanks all the doctors who are our warriors in white for this selfless and relentless contribution to the society. So, coming back to the scientific piece, it's an extreme privilege to have the most eminent speakers with us, and I'm sure that you will are going to enjoy this piece. And I'm proud to introduce our moderator of this program, Professor and Dr. Arul Raj. As we all know that Dr. Arul Raj needs no introduction. He himself is a well-known among the entire fraternity. But I would just like to add few words in his honor. So Dr. Arul Raj is currently the president of API and honorary national professor of medicine, IMA CGP India, and honorary national professor of medicine, IMA India. He is also the winner. He has also received the Dr. B.C. Roy National Award, which is a very high professional award in India, and he has also has a very immense contribution in developing many API guidelines, positioning documents, white papers, and numerous articles on lifestyle and the current liver related areas. His current public health interests are the prevention and control of non-communicable diseases, cardio-diabetic medicine, digital health, rural health, and pre-hospital trauma and emergency care. So, with this, am extremely privileged and honored to welcome you and thank you for accepting our request to moderate this scientific piece on World Hepatitis Day. So,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Arora, the
Thank
floor
you.
is all yours to take it ahead. Thank you.
See, thank you very much. I should really appreciate the excellent introduction by Payal. She has done a very excellent job. And I am really happy to be with the leading hepatology giants of the world. I will not say India. I mean, one is my very closest friend, Dr. Rajesh Bhatia, and another is a esteemed faculty of today. I mean, Dr. Anil Arora. I mean, they are strengthening the Liver Foundation. The topic has been well positioned on the world, hepatitis day, World Hepatitis Day. And in this day, I mean, talking on hepatitis B is more important because this is next to tuberculosis, second largest killer of the human beings. About 1.9 million deaths are happening every year. And the theme for this year is find the missing millions. How many millions are missing? It's 290 millions are missing with hepatitis, right from A, B, C, D. And there are a lot of developments, and I am sure this communication by, Professor Anil Arora and support by Dr. Rajesh will definitely open up the, gateways to the clinicians, how to make a diagnosis, how to do the treatment, how to do the prevention. Can I have the first one or two slides? Payal?
Sir, are you able to see the slides?
No, I am
Yes,
not
we
able to
are.
see.
Yeah, Ms. Pal, we are able to see the screen. Just open the slides now.
I hope the slides are open.
No, your browser is seen now. Minimize the browser and open the PPT.
Uh, just a second, 1 second.
Yeah, you can share again.
So I hope
Yes,
the
your screen is shared now. Yes, put it to slideshow. We are able to see the screen.
so I'm sure the slides are visible
Slides are
now.
visible. Just put it to slideshow.
Yes, it's there.
No, not yet.
It was already done. So Vikram, is it in slide mode now? Because I have
No,
already
not yet. Not
made
yet.
It
it.
just came and went off. It just came and went off. Can you make it little quick,
Yes.
please?
Ma'am, one thing you can do is you can stop the screen share and again share the screen, please.
Shall I
Okay.
do it from my end?
Or you do a extempore from your side, Arulraj, you are very good at it.
No, not so good, but still we can try. Let's not. I'm just
Yeah.
telling. The
Just a
screen
minute,
can.
doctor.
Why depend on the slides?
You have seen that? Hello.
Is it good to go now?
Yeah. Are you able to
Hey,
see the slides?
Yes,
Just
yes,
the
Yeah.
PPT is
Then
not a slideshow.
I mean,
yes.
this is not. I mean, this is okay.
yeah.
Okay, then I'll go ahead. Yeah, I mean, this is just an opening of the hepatitis B. We have 5 categories here. One is an acute hepatitis, subclinical hepatitis, the healthy carrier, persistent infection, chronic hepatitis, and how they recover, how they go for a chronic liver disease or a carcinoma or a death. All those things are there. There are some recent development, the diagnosis. I am sure Professor Anil will be able to highlight on the fibro test, ACTI test, and this thrombomodulins. And also, there are some current treatments. Also, there are some developments like pegylated interferon antivirals. We know about hepatitis B vaccine for prevention, but an immunomodulating vaccine has also come out. I am sure. I mean, he will also highlight us on the methods of prevention, how to avoid getting this infection also, because it's a bloodborne infection. These are all the few areas I think we look forward hearing from, I mean, Professor Anil Arora. Now over to Professor Anil Arora.
Thank you, Professor Arul. I am extremely thankful to the API body and headed by Professor Arul and Professor Rajesh Upadhyay. Payal, can you stop sharing the slides?
Sure, doctor.
Okay.
I think doctor has left. We'll wait for a couple of minutes, and doctor has disconnected.
I'd like to share my slides now. Are my slides visible?
Yes, doctor, your screen is visible. Just open the PPT now.
Can you see my slides?
Not yet, doctor. We're able to see your screen. You need to minimize the PPT. Minimize the browser, doctor.
Okay.
Yeah. Open the PPT.
PPT is already open in the background.
Yeah, please put it to full screen. Bring it on the screen.
I'll have to
Yeah, doctor. Please minimize the browser, doctor.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, very perfect. Yeah, put it to slideshow.
Yeah.
And the rectangular tab at the bottom, just click on hide. The tab will go away. It won't hide anything.
Is my slide visible now?
Yes, doctor, your slides are visible. You're good to go.
Yes. Very fine.
Thank you, Professor Arul and Professor Rajesh for giving me this opportunity. The topic of my presentation is diagnosis, prevention, and treatment of viral hepatitis. Viral hepatitis, by default, is a systemic viral infection which is characterized by hepatic cell necrosis and inflammation. It has a classical and characteristic clinical, biochemical, and histopathological picture, affecting hundreds and millions of the people worldwide, leading to considerable morbidity and mortality. In fact, we are from the era of Dr. Arul and Dr. Rajesh, in which during our MBBS, MD, and DM days, we were taught that there are only two types of viral hepatitis. The one which was transmitted by the fecal-oral route was referred to as infectious hepatitis, and the one which was transmitted by the blood or the blood-borne product was referred to as a serum hepatitis. In fact, up to World War II, only two types of infections were known. But thanks to giant strides made by genetic engineering, molecular biology, and genetics, today we have a host of viruses which have been very well characterized, known to be causing acute and chronic hepatitis. And this list includes viruses like hepatitis A, B, C, D, E, F, G, T, and maybe 5 years down the lane, Dr. Rajesh and Dr. Arul may be having some another gentleman presenting at the same forum, and we may end up completing the list of the English alphabets going right up to Z. Starting with the commonest virus, which we see in day-to-day basis, especially in the pediatric age group, is hepatitis A. It has a typical worldwide distribution, occurs in almost all countries, classically occurs in the pediatric age group. Luckily for our patient, there are no animal or human reservoirs and hence does not lead to chronicity. That means you will never see a patient who has a chronic hepatitis A virus infection. The disease classically occurs by fecal-oral transmission. That means a person has to come in contact with another person through his stools or contaminated water. So it has to be contamination of the food and water from the excreta of the infected individual. That is the basic prerequisite to develop a hepatitis A virus infection. Like in COVID-19 today, the prerequisite is that you need to have either droplet or airborne infection, which has to be in the vicinity of the person who is infected. Boiling alone kills the virus. Nothing short of that will kill the virus in hepatitis A. If you think your children have heated the pizza after keeping it in the microwave, or if they kept an ice cream in the freezing in the refrigerator and that was contaminated with hepatitis A, just because the ice cream was kept in the refrigerator, that is not enough to get rid of the virus hepatitis A. So if you want to get rid of the hepatitis A virus, you have to boil the food. Incubation period is typically from 15 to 30 days. Luckily for us, luckily for our patients, most of the infections are minor. They tend to occur in the children. They are in the asymptomatic phase. If you remember, we have a epidemiological data on COVID-19 from Delhi, in which 23% of the population is affected. So if we have a population of around 2 crore in India, so that is 1/4. That means 50 lakh people should be affected with hepatitis, with COVID-19 in Delhi. But the total number of the people who have been affected in Delhi is around 1,20,000. That means majority are asymptomatic. Exactly the same thing happens in hepatitis A. Typically, the disease occurs in childhood. Immunity, once it occurs, it leads to herd immunity, and it is a lifelong immunity, and antibodies in the breast milk are protective. That is the reason it typically occurs in the first 5 years of the life. Nobody will have hepatitis A in the first year of life. That is because the antibodies in the breast milk are protective. So the maximum incidence occurs in the childhood, early childhood, and most of the patients will develop hepatitis A by the age of 5 years. But another important thing to remember is that with increasing age, you are more likely to have a problem with hepatitis A. If today you and me as adults suffer from hepatitis A, we are more likely to have symptomatic disease. Look at this population. So if you are at the age of 3 years developing hepatitis A, chance of you having symptomatic disease, that means having jaundice or itching, is only 50%. But anything above 5 years, or maybe up to the age of 20 years or 30 years, if you are having hepatitis A, you are more likely to be symptomatic. Not only that, another important issue in hepatitis A occurring in late childhood or early adulthood is that the mortality related to hepatitis A is only 0.17%. That is 1 in 1,000 children with hepatitis A will die. But look at this. If one of us as adults suffer from hepatitis A, So we will have a 200 times more mortality. So what is the lesson? Given the choice, if you have to have hepatitis A, better have it in the childhood rather than the adulthood. A diagnosis of hepatitis A is very easy. You look for IgM type of antibodies. If you want to know whether you have been protected, as the surveillance is going on in Delhi and other parts of India by ICMR, to look for your protection against COVID. Similarly, you can look for IgG type of antibodies in you to know whether you have had protection against hepatitis A virus. Again, the treatment, as Dr. Arul had asked me to talk of prevention, I think the most important part of the prevention of hepatitis A is that you need to use a clean chlorinated drinking water. There should be a proper excreta of the human feces, which is the most important source of contamination. Vaccine is easily available, and if there are household contacts, you can give them immune serum globulin. There are two types of vaccines are available for hepatitis A junior and hepatitis A adults. Up to the age of 18 years, you can give Haverix 720 junior, and beyond that, you need to give the full dose as an adult. And luckily, this company called GSK has also come up with a new vaccine called Twiniric vaccine, in which you have combination of both hepatitis A and B vaccine. So you have Twiniric junior up to the age of 15 years and Twiniric senior up to the age of beyond the age of 16 years. So a same vaccine, combination of the vaccine, same site, same time, same place. That is the advantage of this Twiniric vaccine. Second virus which affects us on day-to-day basis is hepatitis E. In fact, this is the virus which typically occurs in underprivileged country like ours. In fact, this is the cause of almost all epidemics of hepatitis E, which we are used to seeing on day-to-day basis. This occurs because of the excessive flooding and recession of the food waters, and it occurs because of the confluence of the drinking water resources. That means you have poor infrastructure, there are heavy rains, and because of the dipping and sinking of the water under the ground, there is a corrosion of the pipes which are carrying the contaminated sewage disposal areas, as well as they are bringing in the water. So there is a large amount of intermixing of the water and the sewage supply. That leads to contamination of the area which is being supplied by this water tubings. And a particular mohalla, district, city, or even a country may be affected depending upon the degree of the condition. Hepatitis A has the highest attack rate in adults. If one of us today incidentally suffers from acute viral hepatitis, most likely in adults in India, we will have hepatitis E. Luckily for us, it does not lead to chronicity, and there is no case of animal reservoir in a situation which has a human virus. Thirdly, important point about hepatitis E is, surprisingly, it has an extremely high mortality in pregnant women. Imagine a young girl gets married, goes for a honeymoon, gets pregnant, and during pregnancy, she acquires a hepatitis E virus infection. And imagine in the third trimester of the pregnancy, young women has a 20% chance of dying of hepatitis E, which is extremely high mortality, but by any means. Diagnosis of hepatitis E is made by simple demonstration of IgM type of anti-HEV antibody, which is very easily available. Third virus, which was known to us, I'm sure Dr. Rajesh and Dr. Arul will appreciate that when we were doing our MDs, we were taught that you have a disease which occurs after blood transfusion. So that was neither hepatitis B nor hepatitis A. So this was called a non-A, non-B hepatitis. In fact, when we finished our DM, in a thesis on this topic called non-A, non-B hepatitis, in which in the cardiothoracic vascular surgery ward of All India Institute of Medical Sciences, when 8 units of blood transfusion were routinely given to patients during cardiac surgery, about 20% of the patient will develop hepatitis. And that was referred to as post-transfusion hepatitis. And 2 years after that, in 1991, this was diagnosed to be related to hepatitis C. So this is a new virus which has been recently discovered. There are till about 1970, anybody who had a bit of rise in SGOT-PT, people thought, oh, this is transaminitis, it has no meaning, just forget about it, it is just an innocent bystander. By 1980, when we were doing our residencies, we were told, oh, this is non and non-B hepatitis, but it is a milder disease. And by 1990, when the virus was discovered, it was one of the major public health issues. And in Japan and China, this is the Japan and US, this is the commonest cause of chronic liver disease, and it is the commonest cause of hepatocellular carcinoma in the developed world. So this is the prevalence of hepatitis C in the world. We are in this region. Our prevalence rate is 0.9%. That means 0.9% of our population has hepatitis C. We have about 9 million carriers of hepatitis C in India alone. The basic difference between hepatitis C and B is that hepatitis C will never present with acute jaundice. If you see a patient with acute jaundice, if it is a child, it is hepatitis A. If it is an adult, it is hepatitis E. Or if somebody has received blood transfusion, it is most likely hepatitis B. Hepatitis C is a smoldering disease, mostly causes chronicity, and present first time with cirrhosis and portal hypertension and hepatocellular carcinoma. Diagnosis is made by demonstration of IgG type of antibody and by looking for HCV RNA. Unlike hepatitis C, in which most of us will have spontaneous recovery without treatment in acute phase, in hepatitis C, 80% of us will end up in chronic liver disease, which can present with GI bleeding, hepatic encephalopathy, and hepatocellular carcinoma. Again, I'll reiterate, in the developed world, that is Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, as well as in US and Europe, the commonest cause of chronic liver disease and liver cancer is hepatocellular carcinoma. This is the story of a young boy who died at the age of about 25 years. He had surgery, was given blood transfusion. This is from London, and he died of a large hepatocellular carcinoma 25 years after the transfusion with infected blood containing hepatitis C. I'm sure, again, my colleagues who would have done their MDs and DMs in the 80s and 90s and in the early 2000s would realize how difficult it was to treat hepatitis C, because you needed a lot of injections, tablets, ribavirin, so many drugs with so many side effects and limited efficacy. But thanks to recent advances in treatment, this is where we started treating hepatitis C with interferon, then interferon pegylated, interferon with ribavirin, then pegylated interferon, then ribavirin, and finally, and thankfully to the discovery of new drugs which came into the market around 2005, now hepatitis C is absolutely and totally treatable. It is curable disease, to the extent a virus which was diagnosed as late as 1990. In US, it is believed by 2030 they'll be able to eradicate the virus. So this is the first virus, to my knowledge in hepatology, which has been discovered so late and is thought of being eradicated so early, thanks to the genetic engineering and the molecular biology, which has discovered excellent drugs. Now, I think the value of people like me, Rajesh, and Dr. Arul will decrease, because it's so easy and so simple to treat. 3-month course of one single tablet, and you will have almost 100% cure. So people like us will be out of vogue soon for treatment of hepatitis C. And finally, coming to hepatitis B, which is the reason why we have the word hepatitis day. This virus was discovered by a gentleman called Bloomberg. This was a guy who discovered hepatitis B virus in the Australian Aborigine population in 1970. And to commemorate his discovery of hepatitis B, we are celebrating the word hepatitis B tomorrow. Unlike hepatitis C and hepatitis E, which typically occurs in the underprivileged population, hepatitis B occurs all over the world. Unlike hepatitis A and E, in which you have an acute infection, there is no chronicity. In hepatitis B, there are two types of patients. Either the patients are suffering from chronic liver disease, or they are simply carriers of the virus, which we call incidentally detected hepatitis B. They may not be healthy. Earlier, we used to call them healthy carriers. But now we know these patients may be having an underlying disease. The carrier rate in the world will depend on where you live in. In India, we have a carrier rate of 2%. If you go by the enormity of the Indian population, we have 45 million carriers of hepatitis B. If you remember the opening statement of Professor Arul, he said that we are missing millions. This is the group of the patient which is being missed in millions, because most of these patients are asymptomatic, they are not diagnosed, and by the time they are diagnosed, it is too late stage. Where are we in the world map in hepatitis B? We are in this zone, and China and Sub-Saharan South of Africa is at the moment more than us in terms of number and prevalence. But by 2050, we are possibly trying to not only match up but be the front runners, and possibly we will have the dubious distinction of being the country with the highest prevalence of hepatitis B by 2050 in the world. That is a dubious distinction. That is what Professor Arul was trying to tell you, that we should know the ways to prevent it and then vaccinate our population. How does hepatitis B get transmitted? So you have multiple means. Unlike hepatitis A and E, in which the source is simple, it is a contaminated stool of a person which has to come in contact either with water or food of a person who is not infected. In hepatitis B, there are a plethora of reasons why do you have contamination. First is the percutaneous spread. That means you need to have needle prick, ear piercing, nose piercing, tattooing, or sharing of the common brush and other articles. Blood and the blood-borne products. Again, Dr. Rajesh will remember then during our training when we were treating patients with GI bleeding in late 80s and early 90s and early 2000, a lot of commercial blood banks were available. You just pay about 500 rupees at that time, get a bottle of blood. Who will donate in this commercial blood bank? Only drug addicts who will have high incidence of hepatitis B, C, and HIV. And thanks to the insistence by ISD, API, and the Indian Institute, National Institute of Study of Liver Disease, we were able to convince and coax the government to ban all the commercial blood banks. And thankfully, after 2007, there is nobody who is allowed to use commercial blood bank. All blood has to be on voluntary donation to prevent hepatitis B virus infection. Razors should not be shared amongst people who are males in the same family. Acupuncture is becoming increasingly common as a part of therapy. Ear piercing is a common taboo in the females. If there is one guy who comes to prick the ears of the female, 3-4 more ladies keep rushing to him to have their ears pricked. You should remember the guy who has come to prick your ear, he doesn't know the ways hepatitis B spreads. So if he has pricked one ear of a female who is carrying hepatitis B incidentally without her knowledge, the blood in the needle can stay in a live manner and contain the virus for another 7 days. So even 0.05 ml of the blood onto that needle can stay in a live manner for next 7 days. Imagine the same thing happens with tattooing needles and needle prick, which are accidental hazards for medical and paramedical professions. Same thing happens in patients who are undergoing hemodialysis, and there is a subgroup of the patients who are at more risk of developing hepatitis B because of their intravenous drug abuse, and those with with the multiple sexual partners, they're more likely to have this disease. Perinatal transmission from an infected mother to baby is extremely important. I'll just stress something about it. And breast milk is safe during pregnancy as well as after delivery. So this is what happens. Once you have a virus which comes into the blood, it enters the hepatocytes through this receptor called NTCP receptor. Once it enters the receptor, it uncouples itself. This envelope of the virus is removed, and then it goes and very safely, comfortably enjoys in the nucleus of the hepatocyte. From there, it keeps on producing a lot of accessory stuff like pre-genomic RNA, the various components of the structural and non-structural component of the virus. Large number of the viral particles are produced and they are put out. So the virus is using the ready-made machinery of the hepatocyte to produce millions of the virus. In fact, up to on daily basis, 10 to the power 5 copies of the virus are produced on daily basis. So this is the slide I think I want to draw your attention to. If you have to go back today with one lesson, please remember this slide. I think it's extremely important. Now, as I said, hepatitis A and E does not lead to chronicity. Hepatitis C has a 90% chronicity. Let's see what happens with hepatitis B. Now, depending upon at what point of time in your life did you acquire hepatitis B, your chances of becoming a carrier is different. A carrier is defined by a person who has hepatitis B virus documented in the blood for at least 6 months. Let's see first and as an adult. Suppose you and me today develop hepatitis B as adult. within 6 months, 95% of us will spontaneously clear the virus without any treatment. That is acute hepatitis B. So this is an adult. So our carrier rate will be around 5%. So that means if you and me today get pricked with a needle which is contaminated, or we get blood transfusion, we will spontaneously clear the virus over next 6 months in 95% of the cases. So only 5% of us will get chronic infection. That means we'll continue to have the infection after 6 months. Look at this young baby who's born at birth from an infected mother. If you get an infection from the mother at birth, this baby does not have a good immune system. This baby will not be able to get rid of the virus. His chance of remaining with hepatitis B for more than 6 months. Imagine, and please understand, if you are chronic hepatitis B carrier once in life, you will always remain carrier. Once a carrier is always a carrier. So your chances of remaining a carrier throughout life is 95%. What is the fault of this baby who is yet to be born? Fault lies with us as clinicians, as physicians, as gynecologists, as epidemiologists, as pediatricians, because we don't screen our mother. All pregnant mothers should be screened. And if this mother is positive with hepatitis B, we should make all efforts to prevent the baby. It is our duty. It is the duty of the physician, gastroenterologist, the general practitioners, the gynecologists, pediatrician, epidemiologists, and the society in general. Because this boy will be positive with hepatitis B, and he has to live with this for 95% of the time throughout his life. And same thing happens. See, if you develop hepatitis B at the age of 4 years, your chance of getting in chronicity is around 40%. So what is the lesson? The lesson is, given the choice, if you want to have hepatitis B, you have it in adulthood. I told you, if you want to have hepatitis A, have it in the childhood. If you want to have hepatitis B, better have it in the adulthood. And luckily for us, that if the patient comes, if you develop hepatitis B in adults, 95% of the chances are that it will spontaneously clear the virus, the body's defenses, and you will be free of virus after 6 months. But 5% of us will remain carrier after 6 months. And once you are a carrier, you are a lifelong carrier. During acute infection, the virus is excreted in every body fluid. That is serum, CSF, breast milk, acidic fluid, gastric juice, pleural fluid, urine, saliva, and seminal fluid. So in acute infection, most of us will have spontaneous recovery. 1% will develop acute liver failure, whereas 5% of adults will develop chronicity, and those with chronic hepatitis B are likely to develop complications like chronic liver disease, hepatocellular carcinoma, and cirrhosis of the liver. So in adults, when we clear the virus, we developed antibody against the hepatitis B. This is called anti-hepatitis B antibody. So this is what we should check. This is our duty as clinicians, as gastroenterologists, physicians, and general practitioner. Anybody who comes to you for any checkup, please get an anti-HBs antibody. If this is negative, that means you are not protected against hepatitis B, and get vaccinated. Whereas 90% of the people born at birth from infected mother, 40% of young children will become chronic carrier. And those with chronic carrier are likely to develop cirrhosis. And the mere fact that you have hepatitis B virus in the blood, you have 200 times more risk of development of hepatocellular carcinoma. This is another story of a 30-year-old boy who died of a massive GI bleed. At surgery, he was found to have macronodular cirrhosis, because at the age of 5 years, this guy met with an accident, received blood transfusion, and died of post-necrotic, post-hepatitis B cirrhosis. The diagnosis of hepatitis B is not different from other types of diagnosis of jaundice. You have a classical symptom. You are seasoned physicians. I don't need to tell you how to diagnose hepatitis. In clinical practice, patient will have prodromal symptom, anorexia, nausea, vomiting, and then you will have jaundice, high-colored stools, and itching. Mind you, patient will come and tell you, Dr. Saab, I am having yellowness of the sclera, and I am having yellow eyes, and I am passing high-colored urine. And tell me what to do. I think important thing to do during when the patient comes to you with this complaint is get a complete liver function test provided. So many times we just get a bilirubin done for jaundice. Mind you, bilirubin doesn't tell you that the patient has hepatitis. If you want to diagnose hepatitis, better get an SGOT-PT done or AST-ALT done. Because this is the only thing which will tell you whether the patient has acute viral hepatitis or not. Anything above 1000 of AST, ALT, there are not many differential diagnoses. Whereas an SGOT-PT of 500, 50, 200 can occur in enteric hepatitis, malarial hepatitis, dengue hepatitis, COVID hepatitis. But anything more than 1000, you're almost sure that you are dealing with viral hepatitis. So please, whenever you order an LFT, do ask for AST, ALT also. Second thing is prothrombin time, which is extremely important in acute hepatitis. This tells you what is the degree of collapse of the liver parenchyma. The more the injury of the virus to the liver, more will be the prolongation of the prothrombin time. You know, this is an era of medico-legal problem. If you have a patient with a prolonged prothrombin time, you also have clinical accompaniments. And these clinical accompaniments include anybody who has a persistent lack of appetite, persistent nausea, vomiting, and aversion to eating. So these are the signs of ongoing hepatic necrosis. So anybody who has ongoing hepatic necrosis and prolonged prothrombin time is likely to go into fulminant hepatic failure. So these patients should be referred to centers which have the facilities for liver transplantation. When the patient comes to you with incidental detection of hepatitis B, we want to know whether the patient has a replicative status or a non-replicative status. All those with replicative status need antiviral drugs. How do we test this antiviral status? By two tests called HBe antigen and HBV DNA. And IgM core antibody is one test to know whether the patient has an acute infection or patient has a chronic infection. Whereas in patients who are protected against hepatitis B, you tend to develop anti-HBs antibody. I'll come back again to the transmission from mother to the baby. The infection from pregnant women to the baby occurs not in utero, but it occurs during the time of parturition, that is delivery, when there is a large amount of the intermixing of the maternal and the fetal blood. So the maternal blood contains hepatitis B. When it comes in contact with the fetal blood, you develop infection. So it is extremely important that all pregnant women should be screened. They may have to be given antiviral drug. Pediatrician has to be ready. You have to give both hepatitis B vaccine and immunoglobulin to the baby at birth, because if you are able to save the baby at birth, chance of baby carrying the infection is less than 5%, as against 90% if you let the baby go scot-free because of our own negligence. So to reduce the infection, you may need not undergo cesarean if pregnancy with hepatitis B is seen. All the decision of pregnancy versus a normal vaginal delivery should be left to an obstetrician, depending upon the pelvic and the fetal characteristics. Finally, coming to some updates which I was supposed to talk today, in addition to the viral hepatitis, about hepatitis B in 2020, which Dr. Arul was referring to. So there are some advances of the last few years. I'll just talk to you about the vaccination. How do we define ALT? What are the preferred initial therapies for hepatitis B? And how do we treat spatial situation? Now, HBV screening, I believe, should be done in anybody. I think anybody who comes to you, please get an HBsAg testing done. The reason is, if the patient is incidentally detected, he may be in a better condition to undergo treatment than if it is diagnosed at a stage of hepatitis B or with cirrhosis or hepatocellular carcinoma. When we started treating, I'm sure Dr. Rajesh and Dr. Arul will agree with me, we had very limited option of treating hepatitis B. When I first started giving interferon injection, I would sit for 2 hours with the patient. This was the VIP patient in All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and the response rate was only 20%. But thanks to recent advances in treatment of hepatitis B, we are developing newer and newer drugs, and we are possibly getting rid of this injectable drug called pegylated interferon, which I believe had more side effects than effects in treatment of hepatitis B. We have 3 types of vaccines which are available for hepatitis B and hepatitis A. I have already talked to you about the twin vaccine of hepatitis B. There is an alternative dose schedule of 4-dose vaccine, especially in patients who are having chronic renal failure and those with immunocompromised state, whereas WHO has also come up, this is FDA approved vaccine, in which 2 vaccine doses may be good enough. This is immunomodulating vaccine, which Dr. Arul was referring to in his introductory speech, but it is still not available in India. ASLD has also tried to redefine what we consider today as an abnormal ALT. So the current definition is anybody in males who has SGOT-PT of more than 30 or females with SGOT-PT of more than 90 should be considered to have abnormally elevated ALT. And whenever the patient comes to us with hepatitis B, we have three things will decide whether the patient needs treatment or not. What is the AST/ALT level? That will indicate that the virus is generating an immune response in the body, so he needs treatment. Anybody who has a DNA which is elevated, that means the virus is multiplying. Anybody whose liver biopsy shows evidence of necroinflammation. So what do you need for treatment? Raised ALT, raised DNA, and evidence of viral multiplication or viral injury as seen on the liver biopsy. So these are the guidelines from 2018, American Association for Study of the Liver Disease. There are two groups of the patients, immune tolerant phase and immune active phase. So what is the difference between the two? In immune tolerant phase, the virus is lying pretty normally in the body. So you just have HBsAg, very high level of DNA, ALT is not elevated, there is no injury in the liver. So the body is not making any attempt to get rid of the virus. This is called immune tolerant phase. Typically occurs in people who get the infection from the mother at birth. But in age more than 30 years, or in those with family history or immunocompromised state, you are likely to have virus which is in which the load is high, in which the ALT is elevated, and there is a sign of liver cell injury. So this is the subgroup of the patient who need treatment. So very easy to remember whether you have replicative virus or non-replicative virus, and what is your level of DNA, and what is the level of your ALT. So anybody who has elevated ALT, anybody who has elevated DNA, especially if it is more than 2000, or if there is evidence of cirrhosis, all of these patients need treatment. Why is it that we are talking of subgroup of the patient who need treatment? Why not everybody? The reason is some of the patients, the difference between hepatitis C and hepatitis B is, as I said, thanks to recent discovery of these drugs called DAAs, that is direct acting antiviral for hepatitis C, which is a finite therapy and cures the virus because it kills the virus and gets rid of the virus. Whereas in hepatitis B, the drugs will only suppress the virus. Once you start the drug, you have to give it lifelong. You cannot withdraw the drug. So please, always before initiating hepatitis B therapy, please be sure you are only starting the therapy. You will never end it. Please make it clear to the patient. And this is the subgroup of the patient in which we want that you should not give. If the patient has young patient, no evidence of injury to the liver and only high ALT, you can wait and watch. Monitor these patients. Do not leave them alone. So I'm sure on daily basis you must be seeing how COVID virus enters the alveocyte. This is the hepatitis B virus which will enter the new cytoplasm of hepatocytes, will multiply in the nucleus, will produce multiple different proteins as well as the DNA material and gets out. At the moment, the only drug we have for treatment of hepatitis B is the drug which is a polymerase inhibitor. And the virus has multiple points of entry, it has multiple points of application. So how will a single drug acting at this point of time in terms of viral application be effective? That is precisely the reason for the time being we are only able to suppress the virus, not get rid of the virus like what we have been able to do in hepatitis C. So the drugs which are available earlier were pegylated interferon, which Professor Rahul was referring to. But I think with present day knowledge of hepatitis B, hardly anyone of us uses this drug. And the only three drugs which should be used today in treatment of hepatitis B include entecavir, tenofovir, and a new molecule of tenofovir called TAF or tenofovir alafenamide. You should understand when we are treating hepatitis B, what are we achieving? What we are achieving is, you see, the patient has come to you as a physician with hepatitis B. But look at these drugs which are being given for as long as 5 to 7 years. The chance of losing hepatitis B is very dismal. So you're only suppressing the virus. What you are going to do is you are causing suppression of DNA. You are clearing E antigen, but you are not getting rid of the virus. And hence, whatever medicines are available today for hepatitis B will only suppress the virus. And you have to give it for a very long period of time. So the preferred drugs are TAF, that is tenofovir alafenamide. It is one of the very good drugs. And other drugs which can be given are entecavir and TDF. I think it is important for me to tell you that some of us still keep using adipavir, lamivudine, and telvivudine. Mind you, these are outdated drugs. This give you a lot of resistance. Nobody is allowed to use these drugs. So even if you in your formulary or in your prescription, if you have these drugs, please delete them. The only drug which should be used for treatment of hepatitis B today include entecavir, TDF, that is tenofovir, fumarate, and tenofovir alafenamide. These are the only drugs which should be used. How to choose between these two? The drug of choice today is tenofovir dipoproxil, fumarate, and tenofovir alafenamide. The basic difference between the two is that tenofovir alafenamide or TAF is used in the dose of 25 milligram. And thanks to this new technology of delivering this drug right into the hepatocytes, we are able to reduce the dose of tenofovir by 12, a factor of 12. That means from 300 milligram, you are able to achieve the same effect with this new drug called TAF for treatment of hepatitis B. We recently published guidelines from as when I was the president of Indian National Association for Study of the Liver Disease on treatment of hepatitis B. So this is the reference. You can go and read how to treat hepatitis B with the conventionally available drugs. So let me give some examples. How do you treat this patient, 70-year-old man, HBe antigen positive? Look at this. ALT is not very high. There is no necroinflammation, and the DNA is very high. So this is a patient with the immune tolerant phase. In this subgroup of the patient, if there is no history of family history of hepatocellular carcinoma, you can just wait and monitor the ALT. So whenever ALT rises, you can stop the drug. Second patient, 45-year-old male, women. As I told you, up to beyond 30 years, you will start having necroinflammation. All those beyond 30 years will require antiviral therapy. This lady, 45-year-old lady, HBe antigen negative, raised ALT, raised DNA, and this is the classical example when you need to give some drug to treat her. So now we have to decide which drug is the best for her. I told you there are 3 drugs which are available to us: entecavir, tenofovir dipoproxil, fumarate, and tenofovir alafenamide. How do you choose between these 3? We prefer a drug called TAF or tenofovir alafenamide. Advantage is it is used in smaller doses. It can be used in patients who have been having previous resistance to alafenamide, may be useful in pregnancy, and it has less bone and renal toxicity as against the 300 milligram dose of tenofovir. But there are some caveats. So if you have a patient who is elderly, has a concomitant bone disease in the form of either history of fractures, osteoporosis, or past history of treatment of steroids, or anybody who has significant renal involvement, that is albuminuria, phosphaturia, or patient who are on dialysis. In this subgroup of the patient, we may need to give entecavir. But in rest of all patients, young patients, no cardiac, no renal and bone toxicity, TAF is the preferred agent over entecavir. And nowadays, with lower dose of TAF, it has been shown that it even improves the kidney as well as the bone parameters. However, in all patients who have developed cirrhosis of the liver, please do not hesitate. Do not look at the ALT. Do not look at the DNA. All patients with hepatitis B and cirrhosis do need antiviral treatment, primarily with TAF. Those undergoing liver transplantation should be given antiviral drugs before start of the liver transplantation, because if you do not suppress the hepatitis B virus prior to transplantation, you will have a universal recurrence of the new liver with hepatitis B virus infection. Those patients with concomitant hepatitis B and HIV infection certainly should be given at least 2 drugs which have efficacy against hepatitis B, and these include emtricitabine and TAF. So all these regimens should contain 2 drugs against hepatitis B. You may have a patient who has both hepatitis B and C infection concurrently. In this subgroup of the patient, we look for the dominant infection, and there is recent data to show that if you just treat hepatitis C in a patient who is HBsAg positive, there may be a reactivation of hepatitis B. So what we have started doing is, if the patient has both the infection, we try to cover that with TAF so that there is no recrudescence of hepatitis B during treatment. Treatment of hepatitis B in pregnancy also, we recently, with FOXI, we wrote down the guidelines. Indian guidelines as consensus treatment. This is the reference which is available, and I think it is important for all of us to know that breastfeeding in pregnant women should not be stopped. All pregnant women with immune-active hepatitis should be treated as per recommendation in non-pregnant women. In fact, it is said that if in third trimester of pregnancy, that means all pregnant women, you should check for hepatitis B virus DNA at the end of the 24th week. And if the DNA is more than 2 lakh copies per ml, international units per ml, this is the subgroup of the patient who will need tenofovir, because this is the drug which will suppress the virus and will prevent the transplacental spread of the virus from the infected mother to the baby. All babies born at birth should be seen by a pediatrician. They should be given both hyperimmune serum globulin as well as HBsAg to decrease the decrease the transmission of the infection to the baby, because otherwise the baby is likely to remain chronic carrier throughout the life. Breastfeeding should not be denied to pregnant. Those patients who are undergoing chemotherapy and or immunosuppressive therapy like high-dose steroid, tacrolimus, or other immunosuppressive agents. See, so many of our colleagues in rheumatology and other hematology keep using these immunosuppressive drugs. And during immunosuppression, you can have reactivation of hepatitis B. Please check hepatitis B level prior to giving any type of chemotherapy and immunosuppressive therapy. And the patient is HBsAg positive, they should preferably given empirical therapy for suppression of the virus. Otherwise, during immunosuppressive therapy or chemotherapy, the virus can get reactivated. So this is a subgroup of the patient. These are the patients of it who are undergoing renal dialysis and renal transplantation. In them also, if they are HBsAg positive, they should preferably given either TAF. TDF should be avoided in patient on dialysis. So either use a smaller dose of TDF called TAF or use entecavir in the subgroup of the patients. We also again wrote the guidelines for treatment of hepatitis B in difficult situation on patients with biological therapies, immunosuppressive and corticosteroid. All those patients with immunosuppressive therapy should be looked for evidence of chronic hepatitis B virus infection, and if it is present, we should make all efforts to suppress the viral replication before and after the immunotherapy. Some patients may have extra hepatic manifestations of hepatitis B, like vasculitis, purpura, polyarteritis nodosa, peripheral neuropathy. So the drugs of choice in these are again TAF and entecavir, and we do not use interferon for treatment of extra hepatic intestinal manifestation. So as you have been seeing, large number of the drugs which are being developed for hepatitis, for COVID-19 infection, almost on daily basis we are looking at new drugs. We're also looking for new drugs for hepatitis B. New efforts are being made to develop vaccine against hepatitis B, which is therapeutic vaccine by stimulating T cells. We are looking for number of other steps which can block the replication of the virus. This is the list of the drugs which is being tried, but I don't think another 5 to 10 years we are going to have any useful or purposeful drug for treatment of hepatitis B. So to conclude, ladies and gentlemen, treatment guidelines recommend initiation of hepatitis B in patients who have elevated ALT, cirrhosis of the liver, and DNA. Very easy to remember. So if the patient has ALT, has advanced liver disease, or raised DNA, so this is a subgroup of the patient who needs treatment. Only 3 drugs should be used: entecavir, TDF, and TAF. We usually prefer TAF because of its safety profile and because of the last small dose of the hepatitis B which can be given. The choice of the drug between entecavir and TAF should be assessed by the concomitant comorbidities. As I said, if you have a lot of bony disease or renal disease, we prefer entecavir. If you have none of these comorbidities, we prefer TAF. In fact, 2-dose vaccine may soon be available, because if you remember, we as clinicians also, we as doctors also hardly are able to remember the 3rd dose. If 2 doses 1 month apart, maybe the future drug vaccination for hepatitis B. New guidelines for defining ALT has been suggested. If ALT of 19 in females and 13 male is abnormal, tenofovir should be included with the tenofovir alafenamide. TAF is now the standard drug for treatment of hepatitis B. Depending upon the comorbidities of renal or bony disease, you may choose between TAF or entecavir. Patient with hepatitis C should be covered for treatment of hepatitis B because it is known to get recrudescence during treatment with hepatitis C viral drug. And tenofovir is also preferred as a better drug because tenofovir is the only drug which is safe in pregnancy. We do not use entecavir in pregnancy. So to sum up, ladies and gentlemen, the diagnosis and management of viral hepatitis has made rapid advances as we are able to define virus hepatitis A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, and TT virus. Two viruses are transmitted by the fecal-oral route, that is hepatitis A and B, whereas three viruses are transmitted by the blood or the blood-borne product. These include hepatitis B, C, and D. Diagnosis cannot be made by an astute clinician. You need to have a serological diagnosis which should be quick and easy. Hepatitis A has a poor outcome in adults. So please, given the choice, if you want to have hepatitis A, should have better in the early childhood. Hepatitis E somehow has a poor outcome in pregnant women. And finally, most of the patients with acute viral hepatitis will recover spontaneously. They do not need a treatment. Only 1% of the patients with viral hepatitis will go into acute liver failure. And these are the patients who have rising prothrombin time. These are the patients who have a persistent nausea and vomiting and shrinking size of the liver. Otherwise, treatment of hepatitis is only supportive in acute stage. In hepatitis C, we have excellent drugs which give you in 3 months 100% cure from hepatitis C. Treatment of hepatitis B is becoming more difficult. At the moment, the best drug is TAF because it can be given on long-term basis. Prevention is the better way of treating the disease. In fact, at the moment, it is the best way to cure the disease, and everybody should have hepatitis A and B vaccine. And recently, there have been attempts in Nepal to develop a vaccine against hepatitis E also. With that, I'll end up with my presentation and hand over the proceeding back to Professor Arul and Professor Rajesh.
You'll have to mute your mic. You are not audible, Rajesh. You'll have to mute your mic. Unmute your mic.
Sir, it is again muted. Please talk once.
Kindly unmute your mic, Rajesh.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, now it's.
Have I disabled my screen, not file?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Okay.
Rajesh, sir, just one click on that unmute option, not the double click.
Yeah, just click it once.
Just one click. No, it's not unmuted yet. Yes, it's not. Again, hi, team. Can you see what's the error?
Dr. Upadhyay, just a single click. You're double clicking it.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
it.
doing
That's
a single.
That's it.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Yes.
Okay. Well, let me first of all compliment and congratulate Dr. Anil Arora for a very excellent and very comprehensive overview of not only hepatitis B, but the whole of hepatitis in totality. So this was an excellent talk, and I was supposed to sort of summarize. I don't think there is anything to summarize, but the one or 2 points I would like to just highlight. First of all, in patients with acute viral hepatitis, I would like to just mention that hepatitis E, 25% of the patients have got cholestasis. So you get more prolonged jaundice, more prolonged itching type of problem, higher bilirubin levels, and these are features which are more suggestive of hepatitis E. The treatment remains the same. You have to treat the cholestasis, and the standard treatment is there. But itching, you obviously have to use the antipruritic drugs. Ursodeoxycholic acid is most commonly used, and there are other drugs as well. Now, coming to hepatitis B, I think there is a good news and a bad news. The good news is that overall, globally, the trend is that the prevalence of hepatitis B is coming down after the universal vaccination. And it has been shown that it is coming down in India as well. However, the bad news is that every 4 out of 5 patients who are suffering from hepatitis B are totally unaware that they have the disease, because this problem is an asymptomatic problem. And therefore, it becomes the duty of the medical fraternity to try and detect these cases. And as very rightly pointed out by Dr. Arora, we must, test for hepatitis B and C wherever possible. I mean, if you have a patient in the clinic these days, you have patients with fatty liver or those who come with mildly elevated SGOT, SGPT. I think all of these patients must be tested for hepatitis B and C. And he has very rightly spoken about how we should deal with hepatitis B during pregnancy. The only problem I find in this country is that not everywhere do you have the availability of HBV DNA estimation. So what do you do in that case? In that case, in case of pregnancy, if a female is having abnormal liver function test, is hepatitis B surface antigen positive, and is E antigen positive. So E antigen positivity is a marker or of replication and infectivity. So I think in those cases, empirical treatment with tenofovir starting from the second to third trimester is certainly indicated. These are because we are economically not so well off, and there are lots of rural areas where DNA cannot be measured. But I think we have learned a lot today on this World Hepatitis Day, and I'm sure there are very number of questions which will be waiting for Dr. Anil Arora to answer. So let's open the session for question and answer.
Yes. So, Doctor, I have just put the questions with the concerned person on the chat box, which you have on your right hand side.
Yeah.
So, yes. So, I have been putting all the questions which were there during the sessions.
Okay. Anil, first question is: Do hepatitis B E antigen testing routinely recommended in India?
Hepatitis E antigen. You see, if after the advent of drugs, the drugs like TAF, which is only 1/12 the dose of TDF, I think getting an HBe antigen is becoming totally irrelevant. If you see the natural history of hepatitis B, almost everybody after the age of 30 to 35 years will get seroconverted. The rate of spontaneous seroconversion after the age of 30 years is about 10% for every year. So after 35 years, everybody will be E negative. If you look at our data in India, 2/3 are E antigen negative. And the treatment with currently available oral drug does not distinguish between the two. And basically, you have to depend on the DNA level and ALT. And at least I believe that anybody who is more than 30 years, if you have raised ALT, E antigen or no antigen has no meaning. Only thing which matters is in pregnant women, as you rightly said, if you are E antigen positive, your chance of transmitting the infection transplacental to the baby is more. Other than that, I think it is useless test.
Okay, we'll move on with the next question. How to go ahead with vaccinations a 30-year-old who is not aware of his vaccination status of hepatitis B, whether he has been administered vaccine or not?
Just get an anti-HBs antibody done. That is very simple. So there are two things. On the result will be the negative or positive. So if it is positive, then you reassure him that it is protected. Nothing needs to be done. He does not need to get it tested again ever. Okay. Suppose he is negative, that has two implications. First is that he possibly never had the vaccine, or else he had the vaccine and the titers had gone down and they have waned away with passage of time. So in situation like this, you give him one shot of hepatitis B vaccine and recheck the antibody after 4 weeks. If he had been previously vaccinated and his titers had gone down, he will have resurgence of his titers. If he has not developed antibodies after 1 month, then do the complete course. That is the current recommendation.
Okay, so that's covered. Now let's move on to the next one, which is hepatitis B positive patient treated with tenofovir 300 milligrams after getting HPV DNA undetectable, ALT and AST normal level, how long should drug be continued? Well,
I am absolutely clear. See, if I have shown you the slide clearly, what tenofovir is doing is it's only suppressing the viral replication at the fag end. You have a total live machinery. It's like trying to kill two of the Talibani fighters. It doesn't help. You have to bombard you have to destroy their areas from where they are just popping up. So the virus is lying in the nucleus. So even if you suppress it outside, virus keep on getting more and more produced in the nucleus. So as far as I'm concerned, chances of stopping the drugs are very low. If you want to take a risk, especially in HBe antigen positive, after 5 years you take a chance. But I have seen people dying of hepatitis B reactivation stopping it. Please do not stop it. Try to continue. That is the reason whenever you start antiviral therapy, please be sure that it has to be continued for long enough. If you're not sure yourself, the patient is not committed, better not start.
I think the message is very clear. Remember, lifelong treatment for hepatitis B. Now, the next question is monitoring of patients treated for hepatitis C. Monitoring of patients treated with hepatitis C. So, presumably, what is being asked is that they have become negative and has been given full treatment for 3 months. How do you monitor further?
Yeah, you see, presently, with the type of drugs which are available for hepatitis C, you have almost 100% cure rate. In the last, I think, 2 years of my practice, I don't think I have seen anybody who is resistant to treatment. So, stopping the therapy. But otherwise, current recommendations are you complete the course in the normal course of the events. You need to have it at, this is called end of treatment response. That is 12 weeks after stopping, you may have one, but most important is one test 3 months after stopping the therapy. That is called sustained virological response. So baseline RNA and one RNA 3 months after the stopping. That means 6 months after initiating the therapy. That is the standard recommendation.
So basically, you test twice. At the end of the treatment, you know that the patient is negative, and then for looking at sustained viral response, either at 3, 6, or 12 months, that is one test you can do. If they are negative, but if the patient has got cirrhosis, if the patient has got liver cirrhosis, monitoring for HCC is important still.
Absolutely. If the patient has cirrhosis, you're only killing the virus. You have not undone the cirrhosis. So whatever structural damage has occurred to the liver, you will have to keep managing it. So patient should not think that he has been cured of cirrhosis. You're only killing the virus. So in the non-cirrhotic phase, you are cured. Whereas in cirrhotic phase, you are cured of the virus, but not of the liver disease. So as Dr. Rajesh said, that you have to constantly keep looking for evidence of decomposition of the liver disease. And we have had patients who had cure from the virus and they come back to you with hepatocellular carcinoma.
Now, this looks like a very personal question. I am having itching on the skin, spider web of circulatory system on legs. Most of the times lethargy, sensation on upper legs, hypochromic anemia, low hemoglobin, malabsorption from the intestine are the indications of unhealthy liver. Should I visit the hepatologist?
Yes, if you have something weak, called spider angioma. So if not a hepatologist, at least go to a good physician. Let him sort out your problem. And certainly, if your treating doctor thinks it is related to the liver, you're most welcome to come and see us. So I think general physician can do a better job of looking in totality than we can do, as we may have more of a tunnel vision.
So the other point which I would like to bring out is, if you are having what you are calling malabsorption of intestine, I presume that you are having diarrhea and you are having a low hemoglobin, which means diarrhea with anemia. Please look for celiac disease. Therefore, visit your doctor for that. That is something which should always keep, because celiac disease due to malabsorption can lead to deficiency of other vitamins as well, and therefore cause many symptoms, including lethargy. Next question is, what kind of precautions have to take pregnant ladies against hepatitis B? Precautions.
As I said, the hepatitis B does not occur by the fecal-oral route. It occurs by the different mechanism: percutaneous spread, tattooing, acupuncture, needle pricks, trauma, blood transfusion, sexual contact. If you just are able to avoid all the risk factors, your chance of getting hepatitis B is practically nil. So just follow the way it spreads. I don't think you will ever get hepatitis B.
And get tested for hepatitis B for certain.
Yes, this is very important. In fact, it is mandatory for all pregnant women right during their first visit to the gynecologist to get screened for hepatitis B, both for their own safety as well as for the safety of the incoming baby.
This is a question from Payal Shobwani. If my viral load was not detected from last 6
It's
years,
okay
I
not
want
to have questions.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm posting questions from the Dr. Humaira Srinagar.
Yeah.
Who?
From
I
Dr.
can't see.
Srinagar.
What is the question? Can you see it? I cannot see it on my screen.
Yes, so he is asking if my viral load was not detected from last 6 years, and I don't know why it has returned back. And again, when I got tested, my viral load was detected.
You see, the equation between the viral load detection versus load detection depends on number of factors: how virulent the virus is, how is the body responding to it, what is your immune system, or whether you are taking drugs or not. If you have been regularly taking the drug, especially with the currently available drugs like TAF and TDF, your chances of virus coming back is very low. So unless your drug is not good, unless the drug quality is not good, unless you are not compliant with the drugs, the chance of resistance to tenofovir is extremely low. And even in a situation like this, then we use two different oral nucleosides like entecavir and tenofovir. So most of the time we are able to suppress the virus. But problem is, after suppression, if you are complacent that everything is going in a normal, smooth fashion, then it may come back again. Otherwise, a combination of these two drugs is good enough to suppress the virus.
Good. Next question is, this pertains to a hepatitis B carrier who is in contact with a symptomatic COVID positive patient. So, how dangerous or what are the risks basically?
In fact, there is increasing data which is emerging. If you look at we already have about say 17 million cases in the world already of hepatitis of COVID-19. In any case, world is full of hepatitis B. So there will be a lot of patients who will have hepatitis B with COVID. So there is increasing data which is emerging that the degree of injury to the liver, because of hepatitis B, you already had an inflamed liver, and chances of your getting worse liver injury is more. But that will occur only in patient in which the COVID infection has spread from the lung into the systemic region. If you have a mild to moderate COVID, then hepatitis B does not matter. But if you have a severe disease in which the spillover from the lungs has gone into systemic regions like liver, like kidney, then if you have an underlying liver disease because of hepatitis B, then you are more likely to decompensate in terms of stability of the liver disease.
Basically, your hepatitis B is risk is as good as anybody in the general population if the liver is normal. However, in a patient with abnormal liver or a cirrhotic liver, and particularly those who have got a higher SCOT, SCPT levels, there may be an increased risk. The next question is about a needle prick injury from a hepatitis B patient.
And this is the patient from Dr. Uthan. How do you manage needle prick injury? First of all, whenever you have a needle prick injury, you need to have two sets of information. First of all, your own set. Are you HBsAg positive? And what is your antibody status? And what is the status of the source? So this is, you are the recipient and the source. Is source E antigen positive? What is the DNA in the source? I'm talking of hepatitis B. So HBsAg level, HBV DNA level, as well as HBe antigen positivity in the source, and your own HBsAg and anti-HBsAg antibody is important. If you are HBsAg positive, then it does not matter. If you are anti-HB antibody positive, then it does not matter. Only way it matters is if you are anti-HBs antibody negative and the source is having high replicator status. In that case, you should first of all take immediately hepatitis B vaccine and take hyperimmune serum globulin in the dose of about 0.05 ml per kg. So that will immediately neutralize the virus till the antibodies and vaccination give you enough antibodies. But as a doctor, why should you not know your own status? Another lesson we have to go today from here, I'll request Dr. Arul also to reiterate that everybody who goes back today from here, we should know our HBsAg status and anti-HBsAg status. We should not be waiting for us to have a needle prick to go and assess our status. So if we are clear, then we should not be worried about the prick.
I think it is very important to protect ourselves, and I think I must say,
I think very excellent.
majority of the doctors
I
have not
mean,
been tested.
exposition by Professor Anil.
Yes. So
And it is well supported by our Dr. Rajesh, and the participants have put forth lot of questions which are of great value in practice, and we should thank all the panelists for the excellent scientific material. Lot of updates have been passed on to us by both of them on hepatitis B on this World Hepatitis Day. And I would like to stress what Professor Anil closed, that all doctors, not only doctors, health care professionals, who are dealing with patients must know their hepatitis B surface antigen and antibody. It's a must. Now, with a lot of thanks, I think we'll close today's session. Thank you very much. We'll soon meet on another API platform. The same team will be there discussing on, I think, this functional bowel disorders, which was very well done about 3 days ago. I think on Sunday night, I listened to it. It was Dr. Tyagi, and the team did it so well. I'm sure with both of yours, support and involvement, we should be able to take it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank
Thanks a
you very
lot.
much.
Thank you.